So this video is going to give you a brief overview of a literary analysis essay. Specifically in this video you will find out details about the introduction. So we know that we've all written literary analysis essays in the past. So a lot of this is a review, but I just wanted to first remind you that when you're writing a literary analysis, it's not a summary. You're not just recapping the story. You're really taking the time to think closely and carefully about certain elements of the text, which luckily for us, we've already done. We've already done a lot of the planning. We found our evidence. We have that ready to go. And now we're ready to dive in and start with our essay and our introduction. So, I wanted to start with a quick review. Hopefully we all remember when we're writing an essay, there will always be three main parts. So think for a moment, what are the three parts of a well-written essay? So hopefully we remember it's going to always start with an introduction. Then we move on to our body paragraphs. Depending on what you're writing about, that will depend on the number of paragraphs that you need. Sometimes it's 2, 3, 4. As you get more advanced, it could be even more than that. And then we get to our conclusion. So, when we write an introduction, hopefully you remember 3 letters. If you can remember these 3 letters, you'll have a really strong introduction. So think to yourself, what are those 3 letters? And hopefully you were able to remember H-I-T, because we want to make sure that our introduction is a hit. So we always want to make sure that we start by hooking our reader. We're going to talk about some strategies for that in a second. Then you want to introduce your texts that you've read, the topic that you'll be writing about, and then your thesis or claim, which is really important because that thesis or claim is what you're going to be proving throughout your essay. So, what are some strategies we could use to hook our reader in the first line? Well, last year we talked about a few. So we have our magic 3 questions where maybe you're starting off with a series of 3 really thought-provoking questions, not like, have you ever read a fairy tale? Something deeper than that. You might use an imagine statement or set the scene where you put your reader right into the story. Or maybe you're going to find a meaningful quote. That quote could come from the text or it could come from somewhere else. But those were some strategies that we're pretty familiar with, hopefully, and we tried out last year. So I wanted to share a few new strategies that you might consider trying. The first one isn't really something new, it's figurative language. So maybe you might want to start off with just a really well-written line. Maybe you're going to compare Cinderella to someone or compare a fairy tale to something and use a simile or a metaphor. Or, of course, you could try something else. The next strategy is something called power words. And when we try out these power words, we also want to use 3. So here's one that I came up with. Blood, blindness, butchering. Fans of Disney's Cinderella might be shocked to find out that these elements can all be found in the Grimm version of Cinderella. So I tried to use some alliteration. I tried to take 3 words that I thought were pretty thought-provoking that would hook people in. Or maybe you could find a dramatic fact. So if you look down here, many people may be shocked to learn that fairy tales often have a dark and grim history. So a lot of people don't know that. So maybe you might want to try a new strategy, or maybe you might want to go with one of our old strategies. But the first thing that you definitely want to make sure that you do is hook your reader. So once you've hooked your reader, you're going to then introduce the titles, introduce the text and the genre. This time it's a fairy tale. 1 to 2 sentences summing up the stories. Maybe you might want to talk about the setting, since that's something that's a pretty big difference in the versions of Cinderella that we looked at. And then you're going to get to your thesis or claim. And that's what you're going to be proving throughout your essay. So remember, that thesis or claim should include the elements that you plan to write about. So feel free to rewatch this video or access this PowerPoint again if you need some help with writing your introduction.